Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Smoller. I'm the Director of Educational Programs here at the National History Academy. And today we are continuing our virtual tour through different sites in American history. And we are joined today by the Education Coordinator at Carl Sandburg Home, National Historic Site, Ginger Cox. Ginger, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I do have a PowerPoint presentation I'd like to share with you so that you can virtually visit the park with us.
Perfect.
And so I'll take about 15 or 20 minutes sharing that with you. I hope we have a few minutes to connect to our web presence. I'll show you a few things there and then we'll leave it open for questions.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, let me pull up my PowerPoint and we'll try to share our screen. Let's see. All right, we're going to share that. And let's see, let me minimize all these other windows. We're always doing so much. All right, let's see. And then we're going to make this bigger. All right, and pardon me if you hear the beast of mine barking in the background. It's one of the hazards of working from home.
I love it. It's a personal touch.
I'm sure everybody's used to that.
Yes.
So let's start this. All right, my screen.
Yep, it looks good.
All right, beautiful.
Perfect.
Now, do you see one slide or do you see my little next slide thing?
We see the next slide as well.
Okay, so let me, I'm not sure how I need to, okay, wait. Give us a second here.
Right.
All right. So minimize this. I think I need to share and share again. Let's see. I'm going to Zoom from the beginning. Give me a minute, everybody. Oh, here we go. I think we've got no. So what are we doing wrong?
Yeah, I am not sure. I'm not very familiar with PowerPoint. We do see it though. It's
okay. I don't train. Give me a minute, folks.
And if not, we can see this very well if you want to just go through it this way.
Okay. But it's not even playing. Okay. Well, let's just move.
That's what happens live. No, it looks good though. We can see the main slide.
I didn't want you to see all the others ahead of time.
All right.
Let's go and get started.
Perfect.
So I am delighted to be here. The National Park Service has 423 units. And we know them all as national parks, but there's only 63 that are actually designated as national parks. Of those 423 units, we also protect battlefields and heritage areas and seashores and lake shores and historic sites and monuments and trails and amazing array of our nation's treasures. And as you can see from our map, the place that I work currently is at the Carl Sandburg Home National Historic Site. It is in Flat Rock, North Carolina, and it is dedicated to author Carl Sandburg. He was more than a poet and author. He was, of course, a first-generation American. His family, parents, August and Clara Sandburg, looking very stern there in the photograph, are from Sweden. So his first language, his native language, was Swedish, and he learned to speak English when he was born here. His parents came and had him in 1878, and You see here this old postcard. He was born in Galesburg, Illinois, and this was the train station in Galesburg. And as a young man, it greatly influenced his life. And so he saw the trains coming and going loaded with, goods that were going all across the nation, food and cattle and flour and sawmill stuff. And he was really intrigued about where all those trains were going. So when he finished high school, he talked his dad into letting him take off on the train. And so right out of high school, 18 years old, he became a hobo and a vagabond, and he traveled the rails and saw how life was for many of the people who were working on farms as corn was being harvested or wheat was being planted. They would travel and jump trains and go and work. So he gathered a great deal of appreciation for working class families on his travels and people trying to achieve the ever elusive American dream. But he was also a family man. He and his wife, Lillian, married in 1908. They had 3 children, Janet, Margaret, and Helga. And then Helga had grandchildren or children, which became the Sandburg grandchildren. And so the grandchildren were also a big inspiration for Sandburg. He became a storyteller, an author of children's books. Here is Rootabaga Stories. It's a fabulous collection of uniquely American folk tales. Sandburg felt that American children deserved stories about Americana, and that most of the stories that he heard were European based. They were all about knights and kings and queens and castles. And so he wrote the Rootabaga Stories that featured uniquely American characters like working class skyscrapers and trains and post hole diggers and dairy farmers. And they were real whimsical, fun stories. And of course, he was very inspired by Abraham Lincoln growing up in Illinois. And so he ultimately wrote not only Abe Lincoln Grows Up, but some other books that you'll see. Sandburg was a folk singer and a song collector. When he did travel the rails as a hobo and across the country, he saw people singing songs about their life, about their struggles. And he was so moved by it because they were real and they were gritty and came from experience. And they were heritage based, but they were enveloped in the new culture of being an American. So he collected over 300 uniquely American folk songs in this American song bag, and it's still a national treasure. It's an absolutely amazing, amazing book, and we have it at the store. But he was also a biographer and a historian. He wrote this, actually a 6-volume biography about Abraham Lincoln. He won a Pulitzer Prize for the 4 volumes of Abraham Lincoln, The War Years. And then he wrote 2 other volumes, The Prairie Years, which was the years before the war. And he won a Pulitzer Prize, as I said, for that. And he was a poet and author. In his book, Chicago Poems, he wrote about the city. He also was inspired about the prairie and wrote a book called The Slabs of the Sunburnt West and Honey and Salt. And over the course of his lifetime, he crafted over 1,000 poems in his life. And to me, the most profound thing about Carl Sandburg that moved me personally is his work with the Chicago race riots and his work around kind of social justice issues. I mean, I studied Sandburg when I was y'all's age in high school, along with Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman and Sylvia Plath and all the others. And I promptly forgot about him. I didn't think anything else about him until I applied for the job and I dug a little deeper. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, he's an amazing, amazing guy. So when he was in the city of Chicago, he saw how people were living, and he actually was asked by the Chicago Journal to go out into the streets after the Chicago race riots to interview the people who were impacted by the rioting. And the riot started, I'll try to summarize it for you real quick. The riot started when a young Black boy was swimming in the bay and he drifted over into the white zone and he was basically stoned to death and drowned, and the city was in an uproar. And Sandburg illuminated the plight of the African-American experience in Chicago and actually wrote the platform for the NAACP. And not many people know that. And he was given an award by the NAACP for being a major prophet for civil rights. And this is what Sandburg saw as he looked across the landscape of America. Yeah, it was the land of dreams and the land of making things happen. But look at these faces. These kids were working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and very unsafe, unsanitary working conditions and working long hours and getting paid a pittance. Do we have a volunteer that might like to read this poem? Can we make this interactive, or shall I read it? What's easier?
I can read it if
Oh, I was thinking any of the students. Any of the students.
Ben or Anjali, would you?
Sure, I can
All right.
hop on.
All right. All right.
Hello, everyone. I'm one of the intern TAs.
All right.
Here we go. I am the people, the mob, the crowd, the mass. Do you know that all the great work of the world is done through me? I am the working man, the inventor, the maker of the world's food and clothes. I am the audience that witnesses history. The Napoleons come from me and the Lincolns. They die, and then I send forth more Napoleons and Lincolns. I am the seed ground. I am a prairie that will stand for much plowing. Terrible storms pass over me. I forget. The best of me is sucked out and wasted. I forget. Everything but death comes to me and makes me work and give up what I have, and I forget. Sometimes I growl, shake myself, and spatter a few red drops for history to remember. Then I forget. When I, the people, learn to remember, when I, the people, use the lessons of yesterday and no longer forget who robbed me last year, who played me for a fool, then there will be no speaker in all the world say the name, the people, with any fleck of a sneer in his voice or any far-off smile of derision. The mob, the crowd, the mass will arrive then.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much for reading that. That's a very deep poem, but that's why Sandburg became known as the poet of the people, because he spoke for the people. He spoke with the voice of the people that did not have the power or the means to speak for themselves. And again, these were people seeking dreams, leaving areas of oppression and going to cities to look for work and to try to make that American dream come true. And so here is a picture of Sandburg working upstairs in his little office. He only went to 8th grade. He completed 8th grade and then went and worked all kinds of odd jobs. And again, that's what gave him the appreciation for working class family. And you all can read this. He delivered milk. He stacked bricks. He shined shoes. He threw newspapers. He worked at a dairy. He did all kinds of things. And his experiences exposed him to the world. And a time of great change in our country. The child labor movement, the civil rights movement, women's suffrage, World War I and II, the Spanish-American flu, the Great Depression. So take it to heart. Our country has been through some tough times. We'll continue to get through stuff. So here is our park today. It's a lovely, lovely place. And we have Mrs. Sandburg is a legacy her own. She raised champion dairy goats. So we maintain not only the historic home that you see here, but the Connemara Farms goat dairy. And of course, every year we have these little babies that are born. That brings a lot of people to the park. And here's a map of the grounds. It's 245 acres, just the same as the Sandburgs had. And we give tours of the historic home. Well, pre-COVID we did. Now we're doing a lot of virtual stuff and we do lots and lots of programs. And I'm going to grab this and copy it. And then in a minute, we'll go to that if we have time. So we offer an urban park setting that's country. People can come right out of the city and come to this 245 acres and hike and visit with the goats. And it draws a lot of people to the area because it is so beautiful. And Sandburg and his family moved there in 1945. And he was already a famous poet. She was raising champion dairy goats, and they lived there until his death in 1967. And she wanted his site to continue to be a legacy for writers and for, of course, the legacy of Carl Sandburg. And so she donated the entire contents of the home to the National Park Service and sold the home and land so that his land and place would be protected forever, so that we can share with you how amazing he was. And hopefully you'll be inspired to dig a little deeper into his work. And I'll close here with this quote. I think it is very profound, and Sandburg did this a lot. He said, "It is necessary now and then for a man to go away by himself, to sit on a rock in the forest and to ask of himself, who am I? Where have I been? And where am I going?" So I'd like to close my presentation there and open the floor up for questions.
Yeah, that was a beautiful quote to end on, Ginger. Thank you so much for all that. I know we've got some questions. So Ben and
All right.
Anjali are going to be helping us out with that there.
Excellent.
Hi there. So yeah, we'll just sort of bounce some questions back and forth. I think
Okay.
the first one that I'm sort of curious about personally, actually, is what interactions did Carl Sandburg have with other figures in his lifetime that might have had similar experiences? I mean, Woody
Oh,
Guthrie, Pete Seeger,
yes,
anyone like along those lines,
yes,
right?
absolutely. And John Mays, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that we've actually got a whole booklet of anybody in the progressive era. Sandburg probably knew. He he was good friends with Helen Keller because nobody was speaking out for the blind and disabled. And so she was a member of the Socialist Democratic Party. Adlai Stevenson, Thurgood Marshall, Bob Dylan, all Sandburg's acquaintances. Who's the artist? Georgia O'Keeffe, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, you name him, he knew him. But as far as his contemporaries, I would challenge your students listening to look up and see who some of Sandburg's contemporaries, because he moved in a lot of circles, and people really appreciated his freestyle of poetry. Even Frank Lloyd Wright once said to Sandburg, "I appreciate the architecture of your poetry." And Sandburg replied, "And I appreciate the poetry of your architecture."
A next question that we have for you personally, what drew you to this site? What is your favorite part about working at this site?
Okay, well, I will just say that the National Park Service as a whole drew me because I enjoyed being outside, and I wanted to become a park ranger because I wanted to be outside talking to people about bears and snakes and spiders. It was the National Park Service that helped me appreciate history. And so again, his social justice work, and of course the beautiful North Carolina mountains, is what drew me here. But since being in the National Park Service, I have a absolute newfound appreciation for the complexity of our history, and a new appreciation for many of the untold stories. And so that's what drew me, was the untold stories. Yeah.
How are your interactions? How have your interactions been while working at this site? Do people show up and not know who Carl Sandburg is, or do his super fans come and try and correct you and what
That's
you
a
teach?
great question. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you have to understand, the reality is that Sandburg has been passed away in 1967, and his appeal is certainly there with the older generation. People my age and older know and kind of appreciate, even if they just remember a couple of poems about Carl Sandburg. The challenge is, and why I appreciate this opportunity, is to continue to keep Sandburg relevant in the next generation. A lot of people like myself are absolutely surprised to know the depth and breadth of the man that Sandburg and his family were.
At the site, do you have any artifacts from his life that are there? How are they kept up?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. So the cool thing about artifacts, it's one of the things that helped me appreciate history, is that, you know, artifacts are objects that carry stories. And so you might think that it's just an old book or an old newspaper, but in fact, one of our lesson plans is, what does this object or artifact tell you about the person? So when you go in the park house, you see who the family was. And I hope I'll put in fact, I can put the link in the chat box. You guys can explore a little bit on your own. Did it grab there? All right, I'll put it in there before we leave. When you go in the house, the object that they left everything. There are 10,000 books. You see the books in my screen, my little background? That's just a couple shelves. There are 10,000 books in every room of the house, on every floor of the house. And so what does that tell you about the person? They obviously love to read, right? So we are very fortunate that they walked out and left the home as a time capsule of their life in the 1950s. And so it's absolutely amazing. We offer on our website, which I'll put the link up, a virtual tour of the home and a virtual grounds tour, and then a tour of Sandburg's hobo days. So you guys will be able to look at the website, www.nps.gov/Carl, and you can explore the website virtually. But we take care of that collection. We have a museum curator that takes care of the collection. Everything's numbered and artifact, and the object is part of the collection. It's part of our heritage, and we protect it just like we do a tree outside.
It seems pretty rare to have that availability for things. It must be something.
Yes. A lot of times we have to go and rebuy things to furnish historic houses. So we're very fortunate.
We were wondering what we know of Carl Sandburg's maybe spiritual life or his contribution to those American ideas. With other writers of previous generations, like Thoreau or Whitman, there's sort of something going on there that's hard to label, but has many influences, right?
Yes. So here's, sorry about the dogs. So here's an interesting thing about Sandburg's spirituality, as you say. One of his least favorite words in the English language was exclusive. And he and his wife both felt that if they aligned themselves with any particular faith or religion or school of thought, that then they were being exclusive and they were shutting out a large range of humanity. That's the word Sandburg used. And he saw a more holistic and unified approach to religion and belief and spirituality, and did not really ascribe to any particular faith. In fact, when he died, she donated all their money to a non-denominational organization to share the wealth, so to speak.
Wow, that's really something. Speaking of sharing the wealth, was Sandburg still in the public limelight enough to be blacklisted in the early 50s, like some of his contemporary folkies and poets were?
Yes. In fact, he was on the list. It's pretty fascinating because his wife Lillian, her brother, was the famous photographer Edward no, all the names are mixing up. Famous photographer Steichen, Edward Steichen. And so Steichen went on a tour of Europe to take a photo expo of the family of man, and both of them were detained because of the socialist paperwork that they had in their luggage. Yeah. Yeah, because he was all about workers' rights, the whole progressive movement they supported.
Right. And you have, some of Sandburg's contemporaries literally serving in the Spanish Civil War. It's about
Yeah, Sandburg served in the Spanish-American War. He was a
right.
private. Yeah, he got an
Yeah,
honorary high school degree because he served in the Spanish-American War. Yeah.
Yeah. I think due to time, I think we'll pass it now to Anjali for our sort of good wrapping up question. But thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. Thank you so much. Just as a final thought, what is some piece of advice that you would have for students watching this about your job, about learning about history in general? Anything along those lines?
Well, I will tell you, I wish I had discovered a job to be this passionate about earlier in my career. I got in a little late, so you may have to do something you don't like for a while to find something you do like. Those are just the breaks. But now that you know about the National Park Service, you might be able to get a head start because we have some amazing programs called the Pathways Program. I will tell you that it is an amazing, it's amazing to be part of an organization that cares for American history, that cares for American treasures, and to be a part of that stewardship and preservation and a part of a team of thousands of people who also care is something that money can't pay for. So, I don't make six figures, but I love my job. And it does take a bachelor's degree just to barely get your foot in the door because it is such an amazing job. But we have in our agency alone 17 identified career fields, everywhere from electrician to pilot to smoke jumpers to museum techs, tour guides, education specialists, all that. So find something you love and move toward it.
Thank you, Ginger. That's beautiful advice. We did have one final question come in. For someone who maybe doesn't know much about him or his works, do you have a poem or collection that you would suggest they start with?
Well, I would say start with our website.
Okay.
Just because we've got it arranged in a nice way that is very appealing. And so you can look at all the aspects of his life and learn a little bit more about him. You might find that his prose is kind of, rambly and long, or you might find that his prose is really neat and tells you all about the people. So because he wrote in poetry and a biography and children's books and collected music, I'd say start with the website and see what piques your interest, and then dig a little deeper because we've got a list of all of his published works as well as the virtual tours. To me, his hobo years are absolutely fascinating, So there's a lot to explore there. So start with the website. A book of poems that is absolutely wonderful to me is Incidentals. So it's out of print. So I don't know if you can find it. You might be able to search, but Honey and Salt and Incidentals are two of my favorites.
Thank you so much. Engineer, thank you again for being with us today. We truly appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. It was a joy. I appreciate it.
And thank you everyone at home for joining in. We'll be back here next week, Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we virtually visit with Belmont Paul Women's Equality National Monument. Hope to see you there and have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.